Now we're going to go into really building relationships and the social emotional development and ways that you can really help kids to feel safe, heard, and empowered. So, thinking about ways that you can really support social emotional development, some of the things to think about are encouraging relationships, trusting relationships, bonding, how to decrease stress within those relationships, and then intervener support. Megan's going to talk in a little bit about the modules that she talked about earlier, but just for right now, I don't know if Pennsylvania has interveners in the birth to 3 population. In schools, kids who have combined vision and hearing loss might have an intervener who has specialized training in combined vision and hearing loss and really acts as a bridge to help access the world, help kids to connect with their environment. I kind of touched on this already when we were talking about communication, but really one huge part about building relationships and building rapport with kids is just to let them know that you're there, to wait, the final point, really waiting for acknowledgement, to allow them to guide that, to wait for them to turn towards you to say, hey, some mornings when I haven't quite woken up yet, I'm not really wanting to talk to somebody either. So to give them the space to let them know that you're there, and then to wait for them to really turn to acknowledge you, to start making those connections. What we know about learning and kids who learn best is that when they feel safe, they're ready to learn. And so the foundation of building relationships is that once you really establish a trusting relationship, then you can move forward and really learn, invite those tactile experiences, invite those learning experiences. But until you have that groundwork laid, it's really stressful for kids to be working with people that they don't know. And so learning is more challenging, more difficult before the relationship is built. So making yourself available, and if kids can't feel you, they may not know that you're there. So just kind of consistently providing, whether it's with your leg touching their leg, with your arm touching part of their arm, your shoulders together, just letting them know that you're there and that you're close. Really providing that wait time, and really watching, like I was saying earlier in the communication section, really thinking about, I'm watching you and I'm waiting to acknowledge any tiny communication attempt. And whether that is their breath, whether that is their eye gaze, whether they keep looking off in one place and you can say, oh, I see you're looking that way. What do you think that is? Just really acknowledging whatever they're doing with their body as a way of them communicating. And then really starting in this turn taking, this back and forth. If they do something with their body, or if they make a sound and then you make it back to them, or you move your body in that way, and to really start this back and forth movement and turn taking. This is something that when talking and coaching families at the very beginning about what it means to have a child with combined vision and hearing loss, these are some of the really early strategies I think that are really powerful to coach families around. How do you move together in that sort of coactive I move, you move way? How do you greet them to let them know that you're there and then move away? Bonding with families when you don't have vision and hearing, or when the baby doesn't have vision and hearing, so much of what we do is through looking, through gaze, through that early gaze. And so I really encourage families to look at their hands, look at their feet. Are their feet or hands moving to show you that you're excited? And then maybe you can move your hands next to theirs or next to their body to say, I'm excited too that we're here together and joining in this, this engagement together. I think just because we are such a visual community, like we've been talking about, it's not always something to be thought about, but I think a lot of times families do it intuitively. And then if you just point that out to them and say, hey, I see that you're doing this, and that's helping them to understand that you're there, or that you're joining in this together, they'll just keep doing that, and that'll just keep bolstering that relationship. So that's really in thinking about how you interact with each other. And another part of social emotional development is really in that self-directed, how do I learn on my own? How do I interact with the environment on my own? And that's such a powerful thing that kids who have vision and hearing can learn about. I see that toy across the room, I'm going to crawl to it. And I want that, so I'm going to do it. And with kids who have combined vision and hearing loss, that's a really hard thing to structure. And so one of the things to think about is this concept of active learning. And it's really structuring an environment that's accessible and feels safe to kids, that they can be in on their own and really interact and learn about the environment. And through this, they really feel secure within their space. And as they begin to know and understand their space, they'll start to reach out. Some of the things to really think about is something called a little room. And in a little room, you can buy them, and they're very, big and sturdy, they look like that. Or you can make them out of a refrigerator box or out of PVC piping and taping cardboard on the sides. Families get really creative with this. But really, it helps to provide an enclosed space that is safe, that helps the kid feel safe. And so really you would hang things that make sounds, that are interesting textures, that have a movement. And the learner, the child, when they're inside this space, can really begin to encounter things without even realizing that something's there. And maybe just encounter it. And then as time goes on, come back to it, explore it. What does that do? How can I interact with that? That's an interesting thing to feel. And this again highlights what we were talking about, both Carol and I, around the least dangerous assumption that everybody can learn, everybody can get wonderful experiences from, working and playing with things in a self-directed way. And so this video is about a little girl named Zoe. She's in the little room. And what I love about it is you'll watch her. She's banging her feet. She's she's making sounds. She's feeling things. And she gets so excited that her hands start to move. And her hand just incidentally touches this thing that's hanging next to her. She kind of feels it at first. And then she comes back to it and she really feels and explores that. And going back to what we were talking about when we were talking about touch, and someone asked, how do I work on this tactile defensiveness? What are some things that I can do? Setting up a space, it doesn't have to be, a space like this. It can be just a wall of things to explore. It can just be on a tray. Having things that kids can encounter and feel on their own time gives them the space and the empowerment to come to it and leave it and then come back to it and really explore it as they feel comfortable.
I'll add one thing before we watch the video, that it's a really different way of thinking about things, that if the child is the one doing the action, then there's a connection going on in the brain. If you're taking the child's hand with the hand over hand and doing something, there's not a strong of a connection happening in that child's brain, and then hence the child's learning about something. So it's just a different way of thinking about what's going on in their brains.